Here's what happened, and you will make of it whether or not Trump had planned this all along. And it gets us, and if you forgive me, we need a few minutes here, because it's a story that brings out not just Trump, it brings out what's happening within the Trump administration. April 2nd is Liberation Day, and Trump brings out the magic chart. The magic chart with all those numbers that he has the Commerce Secretary bring up. Howard, bring up the chart, bring up the chart. And it's like China has 64% tariffs, and, or 68%, so we're going to put a 34% tariff on them. And so, the European Union, 39% tariff, so we'll hit them with 20%. Japan, 46% tariff, we'll hit them with 23%. Poor Lesotho in Africa apparently has 100% tariff on U.S. products. We'll hit them with 50%. Like, okay, what did Lesotho do to you? The Herdy McDonald Islands, which is uninhabited, except for penguins, we're going to give them a 10% tariff because I guess the penguins are making some type of product that's flooding the U.S. market. You know, that chart was nonsense. Here, and I need to explain what I mean by, if you don't call him an economic moron, economically illiterate. All you had to do was look up the effective average weighted tariff, and you would find out what time. Now, let's leave China as a special case, because China is not whiter than white when it comes to trade. The European Union's average weighted tariff on U.S. products in 2024 was 1%. 1. Not 39, 1. The Japanese average weighted tariff in 2024 on U.S. products was not 46%, it was between 3 and 4%. Australia got hit with a 10% tariff, even though they have an effective free trade agreement with the United States, and they have a 0% tariff on this. What happened, what we know now is the Trump administration did not base the magic chart on what tariffs are on other countries. They took the trade balance in goods. If the U.S. had a trade deficit in goods, they divided it by the amount of imports that the U.S. took from a particular country. So let's say, for example, that Britain had given $100 billion of exports to the United States, but let's say the United States had a $25 billion deficit in goods, they would have said, oh, that's a 25% tariff on U.S. products. That is nonsense. A tariff is not a trade balance. What a trade balance, or imbalance as you will, is when you buy more goods than you sell. And American consumers like to buy stuff. That's what it comes down to. So none of that chart had anything to do with tariffs. What it had to do with was a U.S. goods deficit. But here is why it continues to be nonsense. A trade balance is not just made up of goods. It's also made up of services. The U.S., to a lot of countries, has a huge trade services surplus. Technology, support for other companies, right? The U.S., for example, has a deficit with Ireland in terms of goods, which is around about $100 billion. 100 billion euros, I should say. But it has a massive surplus in services to Ireland, where the U.S. has an overall trade surplus with Ireland of 93 billion euros. So using Trump's logic, Ireland should be putting tariffs on the United States. But of course, they just took a number from the European Union, they slap it all in. So what I'm telling you is, from the very start, this project had nothing to do with tariffs. It has nothing to do with reciprocal tariffs. It was an attempt by the Trump people to get money, not from other countries, but to get money from American consumers and manufacturers and from farmers who would have to pay the tariffs. See, that was the strange thing. They weren't even getting money from China or the EU or whatever. They were taking it off of Americans and presenting it as a great victory against all these other countries.
I mean, it was about 3 hours before Trump announced this pause. He posted on his Truth Social platform and said, this is a great time to buy. And now we've got the Democrats, they're accusing Trump of market manipulation. They're calling for Congress to investigate. Meanwhile, we've got Trump allies denying this charge. I mean, what do you make of that?
At 9:37 a.m. Washington time on Wednesday, Donald Trump goes on social media and says, now is a good time to buy. Now is a great time to buy DJT, okay, in all caps. There's an important backdrop to this. We now know that it appears that Trump made his decision that he would have to pull back on the tariffs, in part because of pressure from Republican senators, some of whom had been on Fox TV the previous night to tell him to back down, in part because of pressure from his own donors, including the billionaire like Bill Ackman, in part because other governments are telling him this is not working. But we know that in part because at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning, he watched Fox TV, and a guy named Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan, who's one of the gurus of Wall Street, said, if you keep pressing on with these tariffs, you're going to get yourselves into a serious recession at 8 a.m. 9:37 a.m. Now, we can't be certain that he had decided for sure to pull the tariffs back, but he goes, a tweet said in all caps. Now remember, now would be a great time to buy DJT. He usually does not sign his tweets on Truth Social DJT. What is DJT? DJT is the three-letter label for Donald Trump's media company on the NASDAQ stock exchange, 937. The decision to pull back on the tariffs to 10% is made at just after 1 p.m. from the White House, about 3.5 hours later. During the course of the day, beginning after the Trump tweet and before his announcement, stocks rise in Donald Trump's company. Just before the 1 p.m. announcement, there are a series of stock moves, what are called puts, which are to effectively buy the Trump stock now. Get it now. After the announcement, the stock soars further. On Wednesday, Donald Trump's stock, DJT, went up 21.7%. If you bought that stock at the beginning of the day, you've got a 21.7% profit at the end of the day. Now the Democrats, and here's one thing I'll add to this, the Democrats immediately say, all right, this is market manipulation. They say, look, a lot of Donald Trump's friends made money off of this. Donald Trump is on film on Wednesday after his announcement with people in the White House celebrating the fact this person made $500 million, this person made $900 million, this person made $1 billion today. Okay? I've asked two senior specialists in financial firms here in Ireland. I won't name them, I will keep this confident, but I asked them because I actually was working with them on various projects. I said, does this constitute spreading market-sensitive insider information, which is a crime? Does this constitute it? And both those people said 100%. The first one said, yeah, said this is a buy sign. This is a buy sign. He issued a buy sign. So if Donald Trump was not president of the United States, he would probably be investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. But here's the stinger in this. The Securities and Exchange Commission since January has been gutted. A lot of its staff have been fired, or they have been told to stop work or to halt litigation because it's part of ripping apart U.S. agencies. So the SEC, even if Trump was not president, might not be able to investigate it because they're no longer effective.